The Journey to Valinor. In the first age of Middle-earth, the elves awoke by the waters of Cuiviénen, a mystical lake beneath the stars in the far east. Their awakening was a moment of divine beauty. They were the firstborn, the immortal children of Ilúvatar. For centuries, they lived in wonder, under starlight, before the Valar, the angelic powers of the world, came to summon them to Valinor, the blessed realm across the sea. The great journey begins. Many elves accepted the call and began the epic migration westward, across forests, rivers, plains, and mountain ranges. This was called the Great Journey. It was not an easy path, but the promise of eternal light and peace in Valinor kept them moving. Their hearts burned with curiosity and hope. Yet even then, the seeds of division began to form. The elves who stayed behind. Some elves refused the journey altogether. They were called the Avari, or the Unwilling. Their reasons were many: fear, distrust, or a deep love for the lands they knew. These elves remained close to Cuiviénen, living in secrecy. Over time, they would become scattered and hidden, their histories fading like whispers in the wind. The elves who turned back. Others began the journey, but turned back before reaching the sea. These were the Nandor. They were enchanted by the beauty of the forests and rivers and decided to stay. Their descendants became known as the Sylvan Elves, dwellers of places like Lothlorien and Mirkwood. Gentle and reclusive, they kept to the trees and water. The Sindar, Elves of the Twilight. One group reached the western shores, but did not cross. These were the Sindar, the Grey Elves, led by Thingol. They stayed in Beleriand, where they built strong kingdoms like Doriath. They loved the twilight of Middle-earth, not darkness nor full light, but a quiet in between. The Sindar became some of the most noble and wise of the elves who stayed. Why they chose to stay. For many, the decision to stay was not out of rebellion, but out of devotion. Middle-earth was beautiful. The stars, the forests, the mountains, they felt tied to it. To them, it was not a world to be abandoned, but a place worth protecting. Their choice was spiritual, not political. The legacy of the elves in Middle-earth. Though they never reached Valinor, the elves who stayed shaped the history of Middle-earth. They fought Morgoth and Sauron, built legendary kingdoms, and guided men through times of darkness. From the great halls of Doriath to the golden woods of Lothlorien, their legacy lived on in song and story. Valinor versus Middle-earth. Valinor was eternal and peaceful, a paradise untouched by time. But Middle-earth was alive with struggle, growth, and change. Those who stayed chose a harder path, but also one filled with meaning. Their stories were not of stillness, but of passion and sacrifice. Conclusion. In the end, the elves who stayed behind became legends of a world destined to fade. They did not seek glory, but found it. Their memories echo in the wind, in the trees, and in the hearts of those who still tell tales of the firstborn beneath the stars. The origins of orcs, trolls, and other creatures. In the beginning, there was only music. From the great song of the Ainur came the world of Arda, a place of beauty, balance, and harmony. But not all melodies were pure. Among the Ainur, the most powerful spirit was Melkor, later known as Morgoth. Though he was granted great knowledge and power by Eru Ilúvatar, Melkor's heart was consumed by envy. He desired to rule, to dominate, to shape the world according to his own will. But Morgoth, like all the Ainur, could not create life. That power belonged only to Ilúvatar. So Morgoth did what he knew best. He corrupted. One of his most horrifying acts was the creation, or rather the perversion, of living beings into monsters that would serve his dark purposes. And thus began the tale of the orcs, the trolls, and other creatures of shadow. According to the most widely accepted tale, the first orcs were originally elves, the firstborn of Ilúvatar. Before the awakening of men, Morgoth captured some of the elves who wandered too far from their kin. Deep in the dungeons of Utumno, he tortured them, twisted their forms, and broke their wills through endless torment. Over time, these elves became something else entirely: cruel, violent, and filled with hatred. This theory makes the orcs one of the greatest tragedies in Tolkien's world. Beings once filled with light and immortality were turned into instruments of darkness, not by choice, but through enslavement and pain. Tolkien himself struggled with the theological implications of this. If orcs were once elves or men, did they still possess souls? Were they capable of morality, of change, or were they eternally damned by Morgoth's hand? Could they rebel against evil, or were they merely puppets unable to escape their fate? We may never know. Trolls, on the other hand, were a mockery of another race entirely: the Ents. Morgoth, jealous of the natural strength and wisdom of the trees and forests, created the trolls as monstrous imitations. But they lacked the grace and depth of the Ents. Trolls were brutes, powerful, dim-witted, and entirely dependent on the will of their master. Early trolls were flawed. They turned to stone in sunlight, a weakness that revealed their unnatural creation. But Morgoth didn't stop there. His servant, Sauron, would later engineer stronger, smarter versions, like the Olog-hai, trolls who could withstand sunlight and wield weapons with brutal skill. From the depths of Angband came many horrors. Orcs bred in countless numbers, each designed for a different purpose. Smaller ones for tunnels and ambushes, larger, stronger breeds for battlefield carnage. Wargs were wolves corrupted by evil will. Giant spiders, like Ungoliant and her spawn Shelob, were dark spirits in monstrous form. Even dragons, like Glaurung and Ankalagon, were not natural beings, but terrible creations of Morgoth's will, destruction given wings and fire. This legacy of corruption did not end with Morgoth's defeat. Sauron, once a Maya of Aulor, followed his master's path. He refined the arts of domination, perfecting the use of fear and manipulation. The orcs remained his main soldiers in the wars of the Second and Third Ages. From the darkest corners of Mordor to the deepest pits beneath the Misty Mountains, they multiplied and they endured. Because evil does not vanish, it lingers. Even after Morgoth was cast into the void, his influence remained. In the cruelty of the orcs, in the strength of the trolls, in the lies whispered by the servants of Sauron, the shadow lived on. The world of Middle-earth is not just a tale of heroes and light. It is also a world of fallen beauty, of power used to destroy, and of creatures who were shaped by fear and pain. And perhaps that's what makes Tolkien's world so haunting and so real. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe for more epic tales from Middle-earth. Morgoth was once known as Melkor, the most powerful of all Ainur, yet within him burned an unquenchable thirst for power and dominance. While the other Valar shaped the world in harmony, Melkor sought to rule it. He rebelled against the will of Eru, sowing chaos in Arda from its very beginning. After centuries of war and destruction, the Valar defeated him and bound him with a chain forged by Tulkas. He was brought to Valinor and imprisoned for 3 ages. But the Valar, in their mercy, believed he could be reformed. And so, after his time was served, they released him. That decision would haunt the world forever. Outwardly calm and repentant, Morgoth masked his malice. In secret, he whispered lies, planting seeds of doubt and pride, especially among the Noldor elves. His most dangerous target was Feanor, the most gifted of the elves, who had just forged the Silmarils, 3 perfect jewels that captured the light of the 2 trees. Morgoth coveted the Silmarils more than anything. He feigned admiration, but Feanor grew suspicious. Tensions rose, and when the Valar attempted to calm the elves, Morgoth struck. He allied with Ungoliant, a monstrous spider-like being from the darkness beyond the world. Together, they destroyed the 2 trees of Valinor, plunging the land into night. In the chaos, Morgoth murdered Finwë, Feanor's father, and stole the Silmarils. He fled back to Middle-earth, betraying Ungoliant along the way, and returned to his fortress, Angband. There, beneath the Iron Mountains, he placed the Silmarils in an iron crown, though they burned him with holy fire. Still, he wore them, his hatred greater than pain. With the Silmarils as trophies and his power rising once more, Morgoth declared himself King of Arda. He reforged his armies. Balrogs crawled from the pits, orcs multiplied, trolls and terrible beasts gathered, and from the shadows the first dragons stirred. The Noldor, enraged by Morgoth's betrayal and the loss of their sacred jewels, rebelled against the Valar's council. Feanor swore a terrible oath with his sons to recover the Silmarils at all cost against any being who withheld them. This oath would bring centuries of war and sorrow. The Noldor departed from Valinor, committing the first kinslaying at Alqualondra, a tragic event where elves killed elves to steal ships. Cursed by their actions, they sailed to Middle-earth, unaware of the doom that awaited them. Meanwhile, Morgoth had turned the land of Beleriand into a dark realm of fear. He corrupted the skies, poisoned rivers, and sent spies across the forests. He remained hidden, letting the Noldor believe they could challenge him. But in truth, he was ready. When the Noldor began settling in Middle-earth, Morgoth attacked swiftly. Feanor, in his fury, charged Angband and was slain by Balrogs. His sons continued the war, but the darkness spread. The wars of Beleriand had begun, centuries of bloodshed, betrayal, and fading hope. If you enjoy deep dives into the lore of Middle-earth, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more epic stories from Tolkien's Legendarium. Thus began the First Age, not with peace, but with fire, shadow, and a crown of stolen light. In the vast timeline of Middle-earth, the Second Age stands as a bridge between the divine beginnings of Arda and the epic tales of the Third Age. It was a time of rising kingdoms, the seduction of power, and the slow return of an ancient evil that would shape the world's fate for millennia. This era spans over 3,000 years and is filled with legendary events, lost kingdoms, and the forging of fates. The Second Age begins after the catastrophic defeat of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, in the War of Wrath. Banished into the void by the Valar, Morgoth leaves behind a broken world, scarred by centuries of conflict. But even in his absence, evil is not vanquished, for his most loyal servant, Sauron, survives the war and hides in the shadows, patiently plotting a return to power. With Morgoth gone, the world enters a period of healing and reconstruction. Elves who once fought in the wars of Beleriand found new realms like Lindon, ruled by Gil-galad, and Eregion, where the smiths of the Gwaith Myrdain begin their craft. Dwarves strengthen their mountain kingdoms, most notably Khazad-dûm, the mighty Dworodelf, delving deep and prospering. Men of the Edain, having fought bravely in the First Age, are rewarded with the island kingdom of Númenor, a gift from the Valar. This island rises from the sea, shaped like a star, and becomes home to a powerful and noble people destined for greatness and for tragedy. Númenor grows rapidly, becoming a beacon of learning, seafaring, and military power. Its people are granted extended lifespans and wisdom far beyond ordinary men. For centuries, Númenorians explore the world and form close alliances with the elves, especially those of Lindon. But as time passes, pride and fear of death begin to cloud their hearts. They grow resentful of the immortality of the elves and begin to question the ban of the Valar, which forbids sailing west to the undying lands. This envy becomes a crack through which Sauron will later strike. Sauron, meanwhile, builds strength in secret and re-emerges in Middle-earth under a fair disguise, calling himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. He befriends the elves of Eregion, especially the great smith Celebrimbor, and teaches them the craft of ring-making. Together, they forge the Rings of the Power, meant to preserve order and beauty. But Sauron secretly forges the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom, binding his will to it and intending to control all the other rings. When the elves realize his treachery, a brutal war erupts. Eregion is laid to waste, and Celebrimbor is tortured and slain. Sauron claims many of the Rings of Power and begins to corrupt the kings of men and dwarves, sowing chaos. During this time, Númenor reaches the peak of its pride. King Ar-Pharazôn, seeking to dominate all lands, sails to Middle-earth with an overwhelming force and captures Sauron. But this is exactly what Sauron desires. As a prisoner, he worms his way into the king's council and turns the Númenorians toward the worship of Morgoth. Temples are raised, human sacrifices begin, and Sauron whispers lies about immortality and forbidden power. Under his manipulation, Ar-Pharazôn declares war on the Valar and sails west to Aman. This blasphemous act triggers the wrath of the Valar. The world is reshaped, Aman is removed from mortal reach, and Númenor is drowned beneath the sea. It is the greatest catastrophe since the War of Wrath. Only a small group of faithful Númenorians, led by Elendil and his sons, Isildur and Anarion, survive the downfall. They sail to Middle-earth and establish the realms of Arnor and Gondor. From Mordor, Sauron returns, building his fortress Barad-dûr anew. In response, the last alliance of elves and men is formed, led by Gil-galad and Elendil. Together, they march on Mordor in a final, desperate attempt to defeat the Dark Lord. The siege of Barad-dûr is long and brutal. In the end, Sauron is defeated in single combat, though Elendil and Gil-galad perish. Isildur cuts the one ring from Sauron's hand, ending his reign. But instead of destroying it, he keeps the ring as a prize, an act that ensures Sauron's spirit survives into the Third Age. The Second Age teaches that power, if untempered by wisdom, leads to ruin. It is a story of rising empires, hidden betrayals, and the dark allure of immortality. And though it ends in fleeting victory, the seeds of future evil are already sown. If you're enjoying the lore of Middle-earth, don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic tales. In the twilight of the Second Age, a shadow began to grow in the east. But in the west, in the elven realm of Eregion, there was brilliance. Eregion was home to the greatest elven craftsman of the age, led by Celebrimbor, a master smith and the last of the House of Feanor. Celebrimbor and his guild, the Gwaith Immirdain, sought to craft wonders that could preserve the beauty and wisdom of Middle-earth against the slow decay of time. Their forges blazed not with greed, but with hope. It was then that a stranger arrived, tall, noble, and wise, calling himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. He offered knowledge freely, teaching the elves secret arts of craft and enchantment. He spoke of preserving lands, healing wounds, and holding off death itself. To many, he seemed a friend. But behind his fair form was none other than Sauron, the former servant of Morgoth, now forging his own dark designs. Under Anatar's guidance, the elves began the greatest work of the age, the Rings of the Power. With Celebrimbor at the helm, they forged 9 rings for men, 7 for the dwarf lords, and most revered of all, 3 rings for the elves. The 3 were made without Sauron's direct touch, Vilya, Narya, and Nenya, each filled with power to heal, protect, and inspire. But the 9 and the 7 bore the fingerprints of Sauron, who had taught the elves how to infuse such power. Enjoying the tale of the rings? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to unlock more stories from the Second Age. Let's continue. In secret, in the fires of Mount Doom, Sauron forged the One Ring, a master ring to control all others. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Through the one, he sought to dominate the minds of those who wore the others. But the elves sensed the moment the one was forged. The deception unveiled, they removed their rings and hid them from Sauron's grasp. Infuriated, Sauron waged war upon Eregion, laying waste to its beauty. Celebrimbor was captured, tortured, and slain, refusing to reveal the whereabouts of the 3. The 7 were scattered to the dwarf lords, resistant to domination, but inflamed with greed. The 9 went to powerful human kings, who slowly fell to the shadow and became the Nazgul, ringwraiths, slaves to the will of the Dark Lord. Thus, Sauron's great design was in motion. But the 3 rings remained hidden, guarded by the wisest and noblest, Elrond, Galadriel, and later, Gandalf. They would not be touched by Sauron's will, yet their power could not be used fully while the One still endured. The forging of the Rings of Power was not just an act of craftsmanship. It was the turning point of an entire age. Hope and ambition collided with deception and darkness. What began as a noble quest to preserve beauty became a pathway to tyranny. The elves, the dwarves, and the race of men would all feel the consequences. This was the dawn of the Ring Lords, and the long shadow of Sauron had only